G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Using the new Nokia Asha 3020 camera phone, fresh from Alibaba, with a little bit of a modification because my subscriber in Ireland, Walkabout 16, started complaining about the image quality of the replacement camera, and I acknowledge that there's a bit of a problem because it's got a different camera, because a Nokia Asha 3020 is not a Nokia Asha 302. It's got a different camera, and the bit that I was really peeved by was that the cover plate over the lens seemed to be soft perspex rather than some kind of polycarbonate that was hard enough to resist scratching. The new camera acquired more scratches in 5 days than the old camera acquired in 5 years. So I went to see the bloke who brought the thing in from China for me, and after initially thinking that the new camera cover plate must have a protective layer on it that needed to be peeled off, he succeeded in lifting the cover plate off itself in its entirety, because it just sits there on 3 projecting pins that are a press fit into holes. So yeah, what we did was we replaced or swapped the 2 cover plates, and that seemed to give a better result, because old mate the leprechaun said that the new camera was filmed as if it was looking through cellophane. Well, part of the thing with the cellophane look could just be the amount of smoke in the air. This is what it is. It's kind of like New Delhi or Beijing on a bad day. Can't actually smell anything tangy and acrid like a close fire, but the horizon's just a blur about 15 kilometres away, instead of being, able to see the branches at 35, 40 kilometres. The light has a really funny quality, and when you do get a bright patch of sunlight, there's this weird refraction going on, whereby shadows have hard edges and light centres. So yeah, that may not be the camera if there's anything else going wrong. Another problem was that the old camera, as has been the practice of photographers for the past 140 years, the tube leading from the cover plate down to the objective lens was black to absorb reflected light and give the light entering the camera a decent chance. Whereas the new camera, the camera case is white plastic, and they didn't actually paint the inside. So this at the moment is after my first attempt to black the inside of the tube on the camera case leading to the lens. The way I did that was by cutting out a tiny little circle in paper, pushing the paper down to cover the lens, and then using a Sharpie. My paper disc was slightly oversized, and it sort of folded up on one side, and there's still a ring of white, and sadly it's at the bottom. So yeah, it'll be giving a slightly washed out look to all this, because there's too much light diffusing inside the optical system of my camera phone. But it should be better than what I had last time. So I'm just going for a bit of a walk, making sure that the 2 missing kangaroos are not hanging up on a fence. So I'm bringing the fencing pliers to cut them loose if they are. I think I'll go about as far as the power line and then up to the other fence and come back along the north boundary. Today, yeah, we're looking at Sunday. Yesterday, no kangaroos showed up until 5:30 in the afternoon when Mrs. Whitetail put in an appearance, and neither of her footlings were with her. So either somebody's found them on Friday afternoon and shot them and taken them for dog meat. Unusual, because the people who live around here know that the ones that are hand fed don't go further than 200 metres from my front gate. Conversely, they know that any kangaroos they see within 200 metres of my front gate are the ones that get hand fed in the morning. And there's no great amount of sportsman-like hunting honour to be had from killing not pet animals, not tame animals, but wild animals who are used to the idea that they're standing on safe ground, which is the case with the ones that live within 200 yards of my place. For the aficionado, that is the side where I did hazard reduction burns 5 years ago, whereas that is the side where I did not do hazard reduction burns 5 years ago, because over there, and I'll take you for the walk, this is a particularly thin bit. All this has grown during my time here, my time in charge here. And as you can see, that is a coppice on a yellow box trunk. The top of that box tree was ripped off by a bulldozer that I was paying for, because we were walking up my runway when we decided on this diversion. The runway on which one ultra short takeoff and landing aircraft has taken off and landed once. Well, probably landed once and taken off once. This is my neighbour's fence. Those of my viewers who watch previous videos will be aware of what I call the sacred fence phenomenon. Well, this is it. I can't have any hazard reduction burning on my place if it imperils this fence. And I didn't discuss the manoeuvre with my neighbour, and it was before he put in this great big wide bulldoze track to protect himself from the likes of me. So I did not start my burn here. I could have, and I probably should have, because then I wouldn't have this sort of outer cortex of friable, flammable stuff on the fence line. The way to do it would be to lay down a wet line on the fence before lighting in from that wet line with a leaf blower and a drip torch. And when I was doing this burn, I didn't have a drip torch, and I wasn't up on the idea of using a leaf blower. Now I have a drip torch, so I would know how to do it now. But of course, you haven't been able to get a fire permit for a couple of years around here. So yeah, therefore, when I did my hazard reduction burning, back through the tea tree, across the bare rock dome, and onto the tyre tracks, which lead up and down the runway. So one of the things that I'm kind of, yeah, that's the stuff I didn't burn. I started my back burn off that edge there, and I burnt in. So the country that has been burned is in fact a whole lot less of a fire hazard. These were all alive, of course, not like now. And they've died as a result of the drought, not as a result of my burning practices. But if I had have been a different sort of a person, motivated to somehow go and acquire sufficient money to have been able to come up here and build the proverbial house instead of living in a lawn locker at the front gate of the property, then this would be the backyard. That's 30-foot by 40-foot aeroplane hangar in a flat pack with a 40-foot opening door would be erected across there. And yeah, at this junction in time, I'd have to say that the 20-foot by 30-foot shed it would have formed the core of a house here on the pad. Don't think I'd have all these flax lilies up close to the pad, and I probably would have cleared off that flat kind of lawn down there to the north of the pad, and this is looking straight north. So while this would be more defensible than where I am, this is what you kind of call a bushfire death trap. What I live in is more of a bushfire fuel bomb, but not a death trap, because here I'm 300 metres at least through 2 or 3 metre high dry tea tree to get to the fence out onto my refuge area. The only refuge area here is here. So when you run out of water here, you're kind of up shit creek. And I'm guessing that once again, if I was the sort of person who had the money to have done it, you know, and to be that energetic rather than sitting on my ass thinking about what matters in life, I would quite probably have dug down into there and have some kind of an undergroundy bunker. Not under the house, but beside the house. But, you know, Oppanocketies tuned that were missed. So they did. But yeah, this was where I was going to have to be. And instead, I got lazy and I'm now only 50 metres from my refuge area. And I don't know, I'm only 100 metres from a water source over there. I guess if I was here, I'd be 250 metres, 300 metres further away from that water source and about the same distance from that one. But anyway, you pays your money or you don't, and you takes your choice either way. I can't go past it without pointing it out because I'm kind of proud of it. Behold, 16 7-foot by 4-foot box trailer loads of dead dry wood teleported out from my clearing and the perimeter thereof. I haven't weighed it, but it does have close to vertical sides on about 2 sides thereof. And if I stay a metre outside of it, perhaps half a metre, and coming back to here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 metres around the base. And I'm pretty sure it's more than twice as high as I. Sometimes more, particularly on the downside. I so much prefer storing this shit here instead of having to provide water and hoses to cool it down underfoot and around me hut when it burns. However, back to the fence. After that little diversion via the pad, the house pad, and as you can see, given a halfway decent season, I am capable of burning 3 metres up the sides of the trees without killing the trees and clearing the undergrowth, which, if I'd done it within the last 2 years, would have cleared away these dead wattle trees, left the stringy barks, coppices, relics of my vandalism, paying a bulldozer, but it would have, as it has, covered up the rocks, allowed the grass to grow, and gone at least some way towards re-establishing the effect described by Bill Gamage in his Biggest Estate on Earth novel. Because that's what I was trying for. Attempting to get this place to look the way it used to look before Governor Arthur Phillip first released the sheep and potatoes at Farm Cove after Botany Bay was a failure in Sydney, just less than 250 years ago. Because there's no point in realising that the colonisation, the invasion and occupation of Australia was a savage, violent, tragic mistake if you don't at least do something. Not only to pay the rent, but to try and undo the bloody mistake. To make the biodiversity and the biomass increase during one's tenure in charge of what happens. Because that's what a title deed is. It's a bit of paper, you pay money for it, you couldn't have been there looking for a feed, chasing ants. Good luck, mate. I'm half a kilometre from it, so I can't show it to you right now, but at my front gate there's a meat ant's nest that's been there for nearly 30 years that I'm aware of. This year it became abandoned, and a echidna tried to dig in there and gave up because no ants defended 2 entrances. And now, on a 3rd entrance hole, there's actual spider webs. There's a funnel web living in the deserted ant's nest. How dry is your drought? Because mine's bloody awful dry. And the thing is, last night between midnight and dawn, several little thunderstorm cells came over here. And we got 5.5 millimetres. Here's one of those funny light in the middle shadows. 5.5 millimetres. Works out to 0.21 of an inch, or 21 points. During the first week of November there was 1.7 millimetres. So that's another 7 points. 21 plus 7, 28 points. Since the start of November, I've tried to pump 43 tonnes of water out through the sprinklers on my clearing. Probably 1 tonne has been lost from the hose connections, because to move a canvas hose you have to empty the water out of it first, otherwise you rip it to bits on the rocks and the sharp sticks. 1 tonne I shortchanged the sprinklers and put it into my daily use boy wall tank, you know, the one for washing and showering and sharing with the kangaroos and the wallabies. So let's say 42 tonnes over 1.5 acres. Works out to 28 points. So far this month, on that 1.5 acres, I've actually put out as much as the creator of the universe, the weather gods, the sky, whatever force or entity determines where the rain falls. And I haven't done it on the whole 100 acres that I'm responsible for, but I am responsible for it. Good, the biggest, oldest tree on my place, that one over there, it's still got green leaves on it, it's still alive. That's pleasing. Your title deed says that you've purchased the top 150 millimetres or 6 inches of the soil. You own everything that's alive from that point 6 inches below the surface on up. You don't own the airspace rights. You can't stop someone from flying over you as long as they obey all the other air navigation orders. You don't own the water rights. You are entitled to stop and keep and hold 10% of the runoff, and 10% of the runoff, the runoff equals 10% of the rainfall. So you get to keep 1% of the water that falls on a land that you hold the title deed for, unless you have other kind of licenses to harvest the off-stream runoff or to build dams and pump water out of rivers and do stuff like that. To have a bore like my neighbour, he has to pay, well, make an application, pay to file the application, get a license, all that, before he ever goes drilling to look for water. You've got to get the paperwork lined up. And lawfully having a bore is about the cheapest, most cost-effective method of attempting to replace the rain. If you buy treated water from town, in town you can buy it cheaper. Then you have to pay somebody to cart it out here, or put a 1,000 litre, what they call a shuttle tank, onto a trailer or the back of your ute, go into the town standpipe, pay $3.50 a tonne, then drive it back out to where you want the water. Or pay $20 a tonne for a water contractor. Well, we haven't found any kangaroos hanging up by this fence. That's kind of good. The other option for where the kangaroos have gone is owing to population decline from the drought, lack of feed, lack of water, shooters, cars at night. May well be that 2 yearling does have been taken away by a passing buck, and he'll stash them somewhere else where there's no kangaroos. But maybe I'm down to just one old lady. On the other hand, they may come back after a day or two because he takes them somewhere they don't want to go, or he goes out and gets himself snotted on a highway or shot by the hunters. There were shotguns going off out there last night, probably 6 or 8 rounds, so I'm kind of hoping that was pigs. It was after dark and it did sound like shotguns. Don't know. The rules change at the boundary. As long as they're not shooting on my place, I can't jump up and down and foam at the mouth about it. Especially because once upon a time I was a hunter and a shooter and a fisher, and there was a phase where I was trying to prove a Hare Krishna wrong, and I shot all the meat I ate for 2 years. And if I can wake up to myself and come to my senses, so can anybody else. But the way the universe works, I had the perfect liberty to choose how I lived my life, and eventually, as modified by pitfalls and potential trips along the path, as you just saw, eventually I woke up to myself and I stopped shooting things for the taste and the grease and the fun of it and the power trip of making something be dead. All of which I was raised to absolutely never question as being part of that which makes a male human into a man. Hunting, shooting, fishing, meat eating. That was a part of it. If you couldn't shoot straight, if you couldn't catch a fish, if you couldn't clean and gut your kill and cook it with not much more than a box of matches and a box of fishing tackle or a firearm, then you weren't considered much chop as a man in the world I grew up in. Mostly all gone now. Now you've got to be able to play friggin' video games on the internet. Get points for killing strangers. Kids on push bikes are worth more than grandmothers because they move faster. But shit, when you think this is the world that we've handed to them, is it any wonder that a sizable proportion of the kids who were born, say leading up to the millennial year 2000 neurosis, is it any wonder that a bunch of them want to live in a basement, never go outside, because they're really good on the internoodle? Well, I can see their reasoning. From their point of view, it doesn't much matter what they do. It's kind of like I've been attempting to explain to my troll the venerable Babbly Pox, who attempts to tell me what an evil person I am for mentioning that in terms of life on Earth, in the opinion of every kangaroo and wallaby, even wallaroo I've ever checked the story out with, the possums agree. From the point of view of the rest of the biosphere of planet Earth, there's not one species which disagrees with the notion that if the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation and the Warsaw Pact have engaged in a three-strike wave, insensate nuclear spasmic exchange. If they had done that, if China, India, Pakistan, Israel, France and Britain, well, France was a bit of a maybe, Britain was part of NATO, they would have done what they were told. But if all the other countries in the nuclear club, I don't think South Africa had theirs at that point, if they had just nuked the Northern Hemisphere's industrial centres, bombed the oil fields, knocked the global vile age back into a pre-industrial era, while leaving probably, compared to year 800 baseline figures for how much of the planet's biosphere was intact, you might be leaving 20% of 1800 figures still intact for the survivors of the war that didn't come to rebuild into. Because at the moment, there's barely 1% of the functional biosphere remnant. You know, like there aren't any fish in the bloody ocean. That's why the Dutch come to Australia trying to catch the little things this big with their super tankers. All our infrastructure, pretty much everything built in the last 60 years, is beyond its use by date. And the people who administer it, they know it needs to be fixed. 3 years ago, they were in the process of replacing lightning risers. They were taking out the wooden ones because they've been there since I was in nappies. This line was opened in 1963, so it was probably built 1960. I wasn't born till 61. And after they replaced that one, 3 years ago, there was a thunderstorm on the horizon. And they didn't want to be up there in their cherry picker with 2 cranes while the thunderstorm was on the horizon, playing with bits of metal, trying to connect it to the insulator up there on the bit of thin wire, which comes down that bit of galvanised strip there with a wooden insulator to protect it, and comes down here and runs out to somewhere over here where they found a place where they could actually get down through the rock. Oh, look, here we go. Here's another cable tying it into another place where they've had a go. And here's one of the nuts they've dropped in their various processes. Structure number 41, Origin Energy. That's the one you never finished. So when this place is as dry as a dead dingo's donga, this is the easement underneath the 132,000 volt feeder line that runs from Armidale in the south off to Tenterfield in the north. Yeah, well, we've got maybe 5 miles visibility here. That's as far as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the shady outlines of an 8th structure. Maximum 400, 500 metres apart. So you can see 4,000 metres. And towns inland have started to literally run dry. And Stanthorpe ran dry months ago, and they were trucking water, and I think it was costing them, it might have been $80,000 a week to truck water in. And Stanthorpe's a tiny little town just over the Queensland border. My highly estranged wife lives there. Hi Zoe, how's your bushfire plan? Mine's pretty shiny. So I think Armidale runs out in February. Tamworth sometime about the same. Glen Innes has got enough water until May at the moment. How's that for edge effect, eh? You can see why I think of the sheep farm as my fire refuge. Anyway, no kangaroos hanging on the fence. Which bodes well and foreboding. That means I'm either going to find them on this fence, or they're feeding somebody's puppy dog and have been for 2 days, or they've run off with some cad and a bounder. He has sweet talked 2 young does, one with a joey in the pouch, and he's left their dear old aged infirm mother with me, and he's taken them off somewhere else to live. Up here the deadness of the trees starts. Down there my place is the forest on the left. This is out over mixed cattle and sheep grazing property. Haven't seen any sheep in this paddock for quite a while. For a long time this paddock was being saved while those cows that you can just barely see under the trees between us and the horizon, they were in a different paddock where there was a dam and not much feed, and they were being hand fed while waiting for the water bore to come online. So now those about 70 all up cows and calves have got a bore fed water trough and whatever pick they can find on this place. And to them, to cow during the drought, that's a really good deal. And up here on top there's not much on the ground except for sheep shit, so they're staying down there because that's where they like it the best, and I like them doing that the best because that means they're not trying conclusions against what's left of the 150-year-old fence that's between them and whatever green pick they can find on the ground at my place. Every person and every entity looks at everything from a completely different viewpoint. Everything is relative and observer oriented. And how they process what they see from their individual observer oriented perspective, that all depends on their collective experience, learnings, wisdoms, misapprehensions up to that moment. I know people who grew up when Adolf Hitler was in power in Germany. Everything that their parents, their grandparents, uncles, aunties, relatives, friends, school teachers, neighbours, shopkeepers, newspaper editors, magazine journalists, everything that they were exposed to on the radio and in the newsreels, in cinemas, picture theatres, all of it led them to believe that a self-obsessed megalomaniac from Austria was the world's greatest military commander of all time. Grosseste Feldherr aller Zeiten. And he led them down unto destruction. That's what happened. Now, the people who enlisted in Adolf's armies, were they to blame for what they'd grown up believing and being taught? Or is it like Eric Maria Remarque said in All Quiet on the Western Front? You've got to blame the people who taught them to think like that. And if you grow up thinking horse shit, You've been raised to think that horse shit is good. You come out the end of the pipeline at adolescence as a young adult and you run around behaving in such a misinformed fashion. Is it your fault? If not immediately, then how long are you allowed to have free hits on the cosmic scoreboard effect, doing all sorts of really dopey, stupid shit before you figure it out? Stands up quite nice, so it does, considering its age. Wires in tension, struts in compression. Yes, it even works for antique fences. So, my father was born in 1909. He was going to school when the First World War was still on. And he reckoned, so he told me, that he was taught that if you cut down a tree, you have to plant 3. And that was 100 bloody years ago. I've been watching this shit for 55 years, you know, since I've been self-aware enough to be paying attention. And I haven't noticed too many people planting 3 trees every time they cut down 1. Well, shit a bugger bitch bum cunt fuck poo. Evaporation is a very bastard. I think in honour of having got 5.5 millimetres last night, next time I get a load of water from my neighbour, I think I'd better put it into the dam. Otherwise, what we're looking at is $1,100 worth of pipeline and fittings, and $500 worth of pump. It's not going to be real bloody useful because all the water is just being evaporated. Yeah, well, seemed like a good idea at the time. What I'd really like is a gully raker which comes howling down there like a bloody pipeline and howling down there and cause me to have to race down the hill in a hell of a hurry in the middle of the night to raise the pump and stop it from being flooded. With last night's wetting down, I can pretty much definitely afford to put 4 tonnes into it. And in view of the necessity, the number of kangaroos that are eating here or drinking here, the fact that under these rocks around this is where what may be the last Latoria burralongensis or burralong frogs on the planet are surviving. I got them through the millennial drought. Better make some kind of an effort to get them through this one. Things you discover when you go for a look. Because none of this was anything like this kind of a fuel bomb when I purchased it. Took the animals off it, the hard-footed European animals, and to be honest, if the forecast for global warming had been anything like accurate 40 years ago, we would not be seeing this level of drought, this level of dysfunction in the water cycle for another 40 or 60 years. I was talking to a mate of mine the other day, and he's got a computer at work, so he does a bit more self-directed research than I do. I pay attention to what's on Radio National, on the Science Report, what's in New Scientist magazine. But he mentioned to me that at the moment, atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide is around 410 parts per million. And if we continue increasing at the currently increasing rate, we're on track to pass 500 parts per million, which means we have doubled it since pre-industrial times. Kurrajong, that's a tree of life, a sacred tree in times of strife. 5 ways the tree will give you feed, and if a net you crave or a bag you need, under the bark there's long strong fibres by the yard. It's an easy carving softwood that on drying cures quite hard. Waylard Kurrajong Budrell Doon, black tree of life, dreaming place. Have you ever seen ants pollinating a Kurrajong flower before today? That far inside the boundary on the endangered species sanctuary. I think that there are pusillanimous, pathetic piss ants and popinjays who like to suggest that I am wasting my time, have wasted my time in trying to protect just a little bit of the biosphere, a functional ecological remnant, which I can afford to pay the rates on the pension. Paid it on the bloody dole for 15 years, something like that. If you don't pay the rates, they can sell you up. There's no law that says you have to farm it. Just go and buy a failed farm and don't farm it. It's cheaper than farming it, because you can't make a living, you can't make a profit out of farming 100 acres. So just give the land a rest. Let it try to heal itself. Sure seemed like a really good plan until this bloody drought come along. In the millennial drought, the one that I saved the Burralong frogs through, in 2007, I missed out on 8.4% of my annual average rain, 8.5%. You know, I'm down about 70 millimetres. Last year, I missed out on 34.5%. $270 or 300 millimetres just didn't bloody show up. This year, I haven't got 250 millimetres, and we're breathing up the back end of November. My forest's been surviving on dew for 1.5 years. I don't know how long it can go on. We're getting, like this week, we've had several days of 31, one day of 33, and that's under the trees in the forest. At 1113 metres, in what passes for the high country in Australia. Well, still no kangaroos hanging in the fence, which is good. Hope I don't find them. If I do find them, I hope they're not too badly damaged and I can release them. Here's an ant's nest. Oh, look, here's an ant. There's another couple of ants. But they're local leaf cutter and scavenger ants. They're not the ants that are supposed to live in this nest. And look how many times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's fairly fresh. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That sort of looks fairly fresh. But it's got dried leaves in it. And it's wet. Might be a snake living down there, don't know. could just be capillary action from the organic material in the ground downhill from it. Yeah, I think it is. But anyway, no meat ants. The lichen is starting to shrivel already after having uncurled with last night's 28 points. Some moss there. It's not that the land has given up the ghost, but it's very, very thickly covered in the leaves of trees that can't keep their own leaves alive. So what they've done is they've dropped them on the ground, hopefully saved some green leaves. This one's down to about 10%. Now what these leaves on the ground do is they serve as mulch. They shade the soil and keep the roots cool. And if that doesn't work, well, yeah, then the tree's going to die and drop the rest of its leaves in the hope that one of its neighbours can survive. That's kind of weird. The tea tree higher up has still got green leaves. The tea tree lower down with its roots in the gully has got brown, dead, dying leaves. Hazarding a guess, it's because the green stuff is getting shaded by the dying trees above. Oh dear, I've just made the classic camera button mistake, and guess what, you're going to have to put up with it because I'm not shooting this video again from the start, and there's too many good little bits in there to delete it, in the opinion of my egomaniacal self. Almost like a Japanese painting of fog in the morning. Trouble is, it's not Japan, and it's not fog, and it's not morning. It's Oz. At 32 minutes past 12 Eastern Daylight Saving Time, which is 17 minutes past 11 local apparent time. Time told by where the sun is in the sky and what it's doing there, and what shadows it casts. Hard edged with a soft centre today. Don't think I've ever seen that one before. Unprecedented. A new phenomenon. That's me lunchtime. No eastern grey kangaroos hanging on the fence line. So, they've either run away from home or they've been dead for 2 days. No way to figure out which is what, but wait for them to return if they do, and hope that they do. But at least I didn't have to cut them off the fence. You recall earlier on in the video I mentioned the meat ant's nest at the front gate, where the ants don't come up to defend. So the echidna only made a couple of attempts. Pretty sure that's the one that had cobwebs in it. At the moment it's just got leaf litter on the bottom of the hole. Things is crook in Tullarook. They're not real bloody flash here either. During the Great Australian Terminal Drought, brought to us by Barnaby Joyce, the adulterous bastard breeder, member for New England. Federal parliamentary representative. The man who brought us the drought. Because he thought that economics was all that mattered. He said, if you listen to the science, you'll never get anything done in Australia. Barnaby has brought us to thus. Look ye upon their works. Judge them on the fruits of their labours. Look what the bastards have done. And there are people who say I'm a nasty man because I reckon it would have been better if 3 billion out of the 3.4 billion who were alive in 1984 had just been nuked or died in the civil dislocation as society collapsed afterwards. That would have left 500 million people with 25% of a functional biosphere. At the moment, we've got 7.7 billion people, and the biosphere is collapsing faster than you can poke a stick at it. South Australia's wheat crop started burning last week. New South Wales began importing wheat from Canada in November last year because we didn't grow enough wheat in New South Wales to feed ourselves. Russia and America aren't having a real flash season. Apparently in Russia, the climate's changing so fast the farmers can't cut down forests and plant it in wheat fast enough to grow a crop because the arable region moves on faster than they can slash and burn and try to grow. There's a sign on a wall in a movie called 28 Days, and on that sign on the wall, it's in a church on a stairwell, it reads, "The end is fucking nigh, very fucking nigh." I get that feeling. There's food on the shelves in the supermarkets, but for how long? Put bushfires across the highways and the railway lines, and how long is inland Australia going to be fed and fuelled? We're already running out of water. Spool this shit forward 3 months when all the fire trucks and all the fire bombers and all the heli tacs all need to be serviced. And there's no water anyway. And we're being run by a bunch of dingbats who say it's got nothing to do with climate change. And they say that climate change has got nothing to do with anything that they make laws about in Parliament, in any state capital of Australia or in Canberra. The lunatics have long been in charge of the asylum and now they're burning it down. It's enough to give diarrhoea the shits. It's enough to give diarrhoea the shits. And the best I can think of to do is look for missing kangaroos and vent on YouTube. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Label out. Ciao. Gentle rugby.